Ukraine launched an incredibly bold and audacious attack, 18 months in the making. You've talked about the idea that this could signal a change in trend, and others have written about, China being able to do the same thing. But when we look at the markets, guys, right, we don't see a very big reaction at all. I think just because of the amount of news flow. So it's an example of something that is potentially, a pivotal moment in geopolitics. Certainly one that means that in the short term, there isn't going to be sanctions relief likely anytime soon, or a ceasefire. But there's so much going on for investors to digest that it's not moving the needle.
As we sift through that news flow, let me ask you about something that's complementary. We had this presidential election in Poland over the weekend, and the nationalist candidate won that election, which is just going to, I think, provide further headaches for Donald Tusk, the prime minister of that country. But we have there a president-elect who is, I guess you could say, anti-Europe, or not pro-Europe, we could say that. And what does that mean just for that country's attitude toward continued involvement in the war in Ukraine and Europe's involvement more broadly, the outcome of that election in Poland?
But the Polish presidential election isn't the kind of thing that we would normally be talking about in a program like this. But because we're looking at Europe that feels increasingly isolated following the U.S. security and economic reset, who is in charge in Poland has a great deal to do with what kinds of decisions the European Union can take when it comes to security, and when it comes, again, back to Ukraine. So even though markets would like to put the Ukraine conflict behind them, in this new global context, which we've talked about in our new research on the geopolitics supercycle, a small kind of domestic vote like a Polish presidential election can actually have a big ripple effect in a changed security and economic environment.
Tina, you mentioned that super cycle. So that's a circumstance in which geopolitical risks are accelerating and accelerating quickly. Talk about that in the context of negotiation and dialogue and diplomacy. On any given day, I get a statement from the State Department or from a European government indicating that talks are continuing when it comes to Ukraine, or when it comes to trade negotiations, or the tariffs and the trade war. Your sense of sort of the role that diplomacy is playing in that super cycle?
Well, the geopolitics supercycle is my term, and it's the name of a new report that we've published. I borrowed from astronomy, the idea of an acceleration. And what we established in the first place, before we get to the present day, is that this isn't, in fact, new. We've seen a tripling of geopolitical risk events materializing. Over the past 15 years, we established the evidence base for that. And in our framework, we look at the drivers of geopolitical risk against the guardrails. And whether we're talking about diplomacy, international institutions, or even global central banks, these are the guardrails. And unless these institutions function effectively, we're going to see more risk events. And I think that this heuristic is a useful way to look at this kind of blizzard of events.